All right, good afternoon, everybody. Happy Tiff Talks Sunday. For those of you that are new to this platform, I am Tiffany, owner and operator of Tiff Talks. I am a licensed clinical social worker by trade and a community activist at heart. This beautiful panelist behind me is going to be introducing themselves in just a few minutes, and we are here to celebrate the second annual Tiff Talks Minority Mental Health Symposium. So we have a number of beautiful brown and black faces here live with us. They're going to join the conversation, and we're also streaming live to Facebook as well. I have our Tiff Talks leadership team here with me as well that are sharing this live stream to their Facebook as well. So make sure that you like, share, and continue the conversation and be a part of the conversation because it's going to be good. All right, so as I mentioned, this is the second annual Tiff Talks Minority Mental Health Symposium. It started out as a way to bring awareness to our community about the issues that are impacting our mental health. And today we are streaming to 2 platforms, so I am over the moon excited about that. This year alone has been one that has impacted our community in such a way that I felt that we needed to have a conversation in the community about those things that have been impacting us. I'm going to allow the panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves since we're running a little bit behind, and then we'll get started right after that.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Bobby Porch. I'm a native Houstonian, specifically from 3rd Ward. Currently, that's right. So currently I'm a 4th-year psychiatry resident at Baylor College of Medicine. I received my Bachelor of Arts at The Ohio State University, and then went on to receive my medical degree at the University of Texas at Houston, now renamed McGovern Medical School. Minority mental health is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and that's why I launched Porch Psychiatry. I plan to provide mental health resources, educational facts, and research-based attempts to help others on their mental health journey. Additionally, I'm a 2nd-year fellow with the American Psychiatric Association's Minority Fellowship Program. With this fellowship, I will receive federal funding to execute a large-scale mental health event to benefit minority communities in Houston. So thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Rodney James. I'm the community leader on today's panel. I'm also from 3rd Ward. I didn't know that. But I'm the founder of Domino Effect nonprofit. We do community work along the lines of back-to-school drives, food giveaways, clothes giveaways, and we're working on new programs. As I was explaining, today and just from an event has put new perspective, in my mind as far as mental health is concerned. And so we'll be teaming up with other people to build on mental health awareness in minority communities.
Good evening, I'm Nikki Williams. I'm a licensed financial coach. I'm originally from Mississippi, Mississippi, but think about Mississippi, right? I'm the co-CEO of Oak Enterprises, Financial Services. I've been in the financial industry about 5.5 years. I have a long career in the corporate world and now over in the financial service industry. And my team and I, we focus on income protection, retirement, estate planning, debt solutions for our clients. When it comes to mental health, I told people, definitely your health is affected as well. So that's really, really critical to me. And so today, we're going to be here with this lovely panel just to address some of those things, how to help definitely affect right. So I'm always grateful to be a part of this panel. So look forward to
Hello, my name is Shayla Elliott. I am a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for about almost 8 years now. Of those 8 years, 7 of them have been in the community health sector. It's actually where I met Tiffany, working in a community health hospital. So I worked in hospitals, I also worked in clinics. And I've worked in areas where there are high stigma and a lot of patients who are minorities who don't often get the resources that they need, or are not even sure what kind of resources that they need. I am from Huntsville, Alabama. Of course, nobody knows what that is, but it's Space and Rocket Center. In case you're curious, it's beautiful. You should go visit. I'm currently living in Houston. I've been here since I was in my second grade. So, but I'll never be Houstonian. I'm always from Alabama. But I'm always grateful to be here and happy to have a conversation with anybody all the time about this.
Awesome. And just based off of their experience and their introductions, I'm sure that you know this conversation will be a locked and loaded one. We want to start off with some audience engagement, and that's going to be our poll questions throughout the actual live stream and presentation. So the first question, and I want to be clear, we do not want a Google answer, okay? We want you guys' opinion, and your opinion is just what we're looking for. So the paddles that you have, we want you to write on that particular paddle the answer choice of your choosing, and then we will share that at the break. So the first question is, what mental illness is highly diagnosed amongst minorities? A, bipolar. B, depression. C, psychotic disorders. Or D, anxiety.
This is what I put two on.
You can put two of them, yes. So based off of your opinion, which diagnosis do you think is highly diagnosed amongst minorities? A, bipolar. B, depression. C, psychotic disorder. Or D, anxiety. And we'll get those question answers in just a minute. All right.
Do you need to elaborate on it?
No, you won't have to elaborate on it. All right. I love the audience engagement. Definitely let's keep the energy going. So as I mentioned, this year, 2020 through 2021, has been an unbearable year for us as a community. Being able to sit through a global pandemic, to having the front line of systemic racism, to the attack on the presidential election, followed by the attack on the Capitol, and then having to sit through a blanket of ice is one that has been disruptions to our mental health. With those disruptions to our mental health, I want to be clear, mental illness is not a singular diagnosis. Oftentimes it attributes to risk factors. And those risk factors are things that will cause you to develop mental illnesses. Those mental illnesses are oftentimes things that can be hereditary or something that is gradual over time that goes into your own development. These provoked and disruptive stimuli oftentimes, as I mentioned, affect our mental health. So it's no wonder, hint, hint, depression and anxiety is high amongst our African American and minority communities. The experience of our African American communities can oftentimes be characterized by the suppression that we experience, oppression, as well as having experienced lacking services in our direct care health system. So to start off the conversation, I want to first attribute what trauma actually does or how trauma affects our mental health. And our first question is going to be to our community leader, as well as our healthcare professionals. What do you think affects trauma? What do you think affects or counter effects a person's mental health as it relates to trauma? Yes. To start off the discussion, I think it's fair to say or fair to share if in any way how trauma affects or counter effects a person's mental health.
All right, so based on the things that you said, right, and from my perspective, everything you named as far as the pandemic, the things we've seen that went on at the White House, at the Capitol, and even the things we experience here in the lower region of the world. For people that come from, impoverished areas, sadly enough, those are the times where we thrive the most, sadly enough, all right? Mental health wise, a lot of the things we experience are out of desperation. We move a lot out of desperation, all while, for sure, anxiety being at an all-time high, depression being at an all-time high. But you have to think when the world is affected, say if there was a natural disaster, at those times, a person who has nothing and the world is giving everybody everything, your mental health is at its best, which is clear, which means you operate at a higher level than, say, someone who lost their job for the first time, because you're used to those situations. You're used to having to live from day to day, and so your mental health is not so much affected by what's going on in the world, but it's more so kind of something you walk around with on a daily basis. So that would be mine. You're not really affected by what's going on in the world, but it's more so what's already there.
And I'll chime here. Trauma greatly affects a person's mental health. And so that we're all on the same page, trauma can be defined as a psychological, emotional response to an event or experience that is deeply distressing or disturbing to you. So it revolves around your unique experience and how you react to it. Trauma can impact a person's mental health in many ways. It affects the person's ability to cope and function in all areas of life. Did you know that trauma actually changes certain areas of the brain and affects its function? So research shows that patients with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, showed smaller areas of the brain that controls learning, memory, empathy, impulse control, emotion, future planning, decision-making, and predicting consequences of our actions. So making those things harder for people who have been affected by trauma. It also increases area of the brain that controls our fight or flight response, fear, and anger. Also, if you've experienced trauma, the body releases increased levels of cortisol and norepinephrine, which are stress hormones in response to future stressors. So trauma causes a person to have feelings of helplessness, diminishes a person's sense of self, and their ability to feel a full range of emotions and experiences.
Trauma does all that? Yes, trauma does all that.
It does. And it can also affect, your beliefs about the future. So you have loss of hope, you have limited expectations of life, fear that life will end abruptly or early, anticipation that normal life events won't occur, such as access to education, ability to have a significant and committed relationship, and opportunities for work. Lastly, the diagnostic criteria for PTSD puts a lot of emphasis on your psychological symptoms. But people who have experienced traumatic stress often present to the doctor with physical symptoms such as upset stomach, chest pain, headaches, etc. So it can really affect your mental and physical health.
Shayla, anything to add to that?
Both great answers, and I completely agree. In the clinic, a lot, especially during the pandemic, a lot of people came in and they were messaging, because I do a lot of remote triage, especially now with the way things are working with COVID. We do a lot of remote triage. A lot of patients are writing in saying, like, I'm having chest pain, I'm having shortness of breath, but it only lasts for like 2 or 3 minutes. And it just happened in my car one day, and it wasn't connected to anything. My face wasn't drooping. I wasn't having, arm pain or anything that were really symptoms of a heart attack. And then you have to ask them, like, have you ever had a panic attack before? Chances are, you had a panic attack. Now, not to say that you shouldn't get checked out if you're having chest pain, you definitely should. But if you're having these short bursts of panic in these moments that make you uncomfortable, it's a panic attack. And it's a lot of people think the stigma is that Black people don't have these problems. And, it's not, I must be having a heart attack because they say that we're supposed to get those. We're supposed to get heart attacks. We're supposed to have bad cholesterol. We're supposed to have high blood pressure. But they don't talk about the fact that we have anxiety and depression and things that will physically affect the way that your body works. And it's also important to say that trauma causes a reframing in your mind of normal situations. So you start to have what most people have a stereotype. You start to think of certain people a certain way. Or you think, oh, I can't be around these people because I can't trust them because this one person has wronged me. And you start to see life through a different kind of lens. And it's dangerous because it blocks you off from some of those resources that could really be beneficial. And it makes you feel like you're kind of alone, and it worsens the depression, worsens the anxiety. And it kind of is this whole cyclical thing where if you don't get the help that you need, or you don't have someone who you can talk to or to express these emotions to, then it can kind of lead down, a road that sometimes people don't come back from. So it's really dangerous to go with your mental health unchecked, or to at least have an accountability partner who you can kind of bounce things off of and say, like, am I being reasonable to feel this way? Is this a normal reaction? Am I being unreasonable? Do you think, since you know me, do you think that I should go and seek help from someone outside of myself because I can't manage?
That's good. All of those responses are definitely aligned with what I see as a healthcare professional as well. Working, as you mentioned, in the center of the medical center with a lot of trauma, both seeing those that experience it physically, but also mentally. One person I forgot, and I apologize to make note of and mention, and I want to get your insight as well, is our minister who's participating in this live stream, Minister Brandon Walker from Dallas, Texas. So I want you to definitely kind of chime in on this question that we just spoke about, but also introduce yourself, since I apologize that I didn't do it in the very beginning.
Oh, it's all good. I'm used to being forgotten about. Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Well, my name is Brandon. I am a pastor here in Dallas, and to be honest with you, I really have nothing to add. I think all of those answers pretty much hit the nail on the head, and I say ditto to all of them.
All right. So with that, as we know, one thing that is oftentimes underdiagnosed in our community is going to be secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, things that we may see or hear that impact us in one way or another, but we don't attribute that to our mental health. One thing for me that I find very interesting is people will always subscribe to PTSD, but not secondary trauma or not vicarious trauma. And I think that it oftentimes evolves diagnosed by us alone in our community, but not identified by the community. And I'm very kind of interested to understand why that is so. So my question for you guys, especially you, Rodney, as a community leader, is why do you feel mental illnesses and variants such as that, secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, go undetected or unidentified?
I won't necessarily say go unidentified, because for something like vicarious trauma, you feel it immediately, right? The only question is, what do you do with that feeling? For people in that community, it's either you can help or you can't. And 9 times out of 10, if you can help, you feel better about it. If you can't help, you feel worse. All right. And another thing is, like I said, it doesn't go unidentified, right? And I was just telling one of our other panelists here is one of the other main reasons it doesn't is because it gets pushed to the background. You have so many other things that are super important, like eating, on a day-to-day, where that's the most important thing. And that alone causes anxiety, depression, PTSD, and so you're dealing with all these other issues, not knowing that there's something else sitting on your back, and so you have to figure out for people, say in my position, dealing with vicarious or secondary trauma, it's more so something you have to not necessarily take with a grain of salt, but for someone in my position, it's solely based on resources. Solely based on resources. So you take something in, check out your resources to see what can you do, and if anything, you can add more resources. But if not, you kind of have to learn how to let it go. For somebody being in a position where they're trying to help the situation, you essentially have to figure out resources to help that, and not take it to damage. But it definitely doesn't go unidentified. We know.
So it sounds like it's more so of prioritizing what the need may be at that point in time.
And in the Black community, mental health is already at the back. You know, it's already at the back of the Black community. We deal with so much more, and for the most part, everything systemic that we deal with, it involves mental health, and it supersedes it. You know, and so we have to deal with that. We have to deal with the Black man and woman coming together. What are we going to talk about mental health? We got to deal with raising our kids. We got to deal with Black on Black crime and all this other stuff they put in the media. All right, what about mental health? You know what I mean? And so it's not necessarily unidentified. It's more so prioritizing, and it falls to the back, all the way to the back. You know? So unfortunately, you know, we call ourselves strong. You know, we like to do that a lot, right? And when it comes to resources, we like to say we did something from scratch, we built something up, but that's not always the right way to go. You know, being strong is not always the right name to call. You know, and at some point we have to come together, we have to talk, we have to realize that mental health should come first, and everything else could be tapped way easier. So that's
I love that. I love it. First, stop looking at my cards though, because we're going to talk about vulnerability on the second half. But with such an outcry that is undetected, I'm interested to know from the healthcare professional, what is your insight on how, or what do you speak to how one should address this undiagnosed outcry?
So I believe that it's important to put the power back into the hands of the people. To address this issue, we really need to educate our community so that people are aware of the symptoms and can report it to their doctor. We can no longer write off mental health as, that's just how I am. You know, ask yourself, did I directly or indirectly experience traumas? You know, now am I having nightmares, flashbacks, emotional distress after being exposed to something that reminds you of that trauma? You know, are you having negative thoughts, decreased interest in activities that you usually enjoy, or difficulty concentrating or sleeping? You know, unfortunately, the lifetime prevalence of PTSD is highest amongst Blacks, but we are less likely to seek treatment than whites. And fewer than half of minorities with PTSD actually sought treatment. We have to change that, you know, through educational and accessible resources, like you said.
Shayla, your insight?
I completely agree. There are, so where I've worked, there are a lot of people who don't even have like basic healthcare. Like they can't go to the doctor if they have a fever. They have to go to the emergency room. They can't go to an urgent care. They don't have a primary doctor. And a lot of those psychiatric services, when you go through the ER, because they deal with so many traumas, like, you know, this is Houston. If you go to a level 1 trauma center, people are there with gunshot wounds, stabbing, you know, there are people who are in a life or death situation. Your mental health problem, though it's a crisis to you, in the way of triage, is not really something we can address right now, because all antipsychotics don't work right now. They have to build up into your system. They generally take 7 to 14 days to for you to even feel different. And sometimes you even have to have stay in a facility for them to get that medication right, depending on what you're diagnosed with. So a lot of the reason why people who look like us don't have those psychiatric resources are because they don't have a primary care doctor to refer them there, or some psychiatrists require them to have a referral. You can't just walk into a psychiatrist sometimes and say, hey, I'm feeling like they'll treat you and say, I'm feeling like I need help. But if you feel like it's something that you can manage, they feel like it's something that you can manage. If you don't have insurance, they're not gonna work for free. And though healthcare should be something that is for everybody, in America it's not. It's not for people who don't have money. And so there are ways, and there are community leaders who have these resources, who have these facilities and these care providers who are willing to do some things for free, or who are willing to do some things for less of a cost. And you can get those resources if you're looking for them. But unfortunately, you're not gonna get a commercial that pops them up. You're not gonna have a friend who gets you a business card. It's not something that you're gonna drive by and see a billboard. You're gonna have to look for them. And if you feel like you don't have a problem because, like she said, that's just how I am, that's just how everybody in my family is. We're all a little bit crazy, you know, then you're not gonna go check it out because everybody has, like y'all laughing, but I'm for real. Because a lot of y'all, everybody has, I know in my family, y'all are watching, you know who you are. You know, we all have that one person who you can expect them to show out at every single occasion. And you think, there they go again, looking for attention. But it's like, have we asked to see what they really need? Like, is there a deficit where, you know, we take them to the side and not a public chastising, but take them to the side and say, hey, like, are you okay? Is there something I can do for you? Do you want to talk about it? You know, do you have somebody who you're talking to about your stresses? Because every time you come, you're not acting like the best version of yourself, and we want better for you. So, you know, if you genuinely care about the people in your lives, don't just discount them as crazy or unstable. Like, help them to find what they need to make the whole. And then think about things. I know for me personally, working in the area that I work in and with the people that I work with, I see things a little bit different. So say for instance, if my kids are wetting the bed, I have a 10-year-old. If she's wetting the bed now, and I know she's been potty trained at 2, we're going to see a psychiatrist. Something is not right, something is off. That's not something that you just do at 10 if you've gone all these years without it. But my normal reaction with how I was raised, I would think, what's wrong with you? Like, you're gonna wash these sheets, we're gonna clean up, you about to get a whooping, like, we need to get it together. But really it's like, have you experienced sexual trauma? Have you had something, are you having these nightmares? What are you dreaming about? Or what are you seeing that's causing you so much terror that you can't even get out of your bed at night to go use the restroom? Like, we have to think about things and see them in our children, because a lot of times people who've been dealing with mental health have been dealing with it their whole life, have been dealing with these issues, and they haven't gotten the recognition in their childhood that they should have been. So they don't know how to deal with it. They kind of just had to retreat into themselves and figure it out. And that's not always the greatest way to make it work.
Good. That's good. It's interesting that each of you guys attribute something in regards to resources. And when it comes to mass trauma, so things like COVID, things like the Texas blackout and the freeze, when it comes to those things, none of that has a face or a respective race. It impacted all of us. And impacting all of us, oftentimes what I see is in these minority communities, that's where we see the hit the hardest. That's where we see the blackout last the longest. That's where we see the COVID numbers the highest. And we don't have access to those resources. And because we don't have the access to those resources, we oftentimes don't have the education that goes along with that or the awareness. And for me, and this just may be my spiritual background, but I grew up in a traditional church. And what I oftentimes see is when there's trauma, when there's a mass trauma, when there's an issue, everyone calls on the church. They call on these institutions because they know that's what we trust, that's what we believe. They know if we won't go anywhere else, we will find our way to church. They know if we won't go anywhere else, we will find our way to work, because we have to make a means to maintain our life and our lifestyle. And in having this conversation about minority mental health, it's important for us to attribute those things and ingrain those things, because those things matter. And those things definitely affect our mental health. So we're going to kind of steer the conversation to include some other institutions that impact our mental health, starting with the church. So my question for you, Brandon, is why is it always when there's an issue, when there's a crisis in the community, there is an outcry to the church instead of including the church? Why is it that when it comes down to minority mental health, when it comes down to systemic racism and trauma, that the standpoint is to reach out to the church instead of standing with the church?
Man, that's a loaded question. I think there are a few things. One, I do think that culturally and historically, the church has always been that one constant in our community that we look to and that we counted on to speak for us, to stand with us, to provide us with at least as many resources as the church could provide, considering, you know, certain limitations and discrimination and all that stuff. So historically and culturally, the church has always been that place where we as a people reached out to, because historically that was about the only place we had, you know, to get the resources we need to experience some type of freedom and some type of hope. In addition to that, I kind of think it's always been just a, you know, overall, it's always been just the go-to thing when trauma happens, when crisis happens. You know, where is God? What does God have to say about all that's going on? You know, that's pretty much the general idea that people have when things happen. Especially, I heard it all. I've heard it for the last 16 months with this COVID stuff. Like, you know, whether, you know, God allowed COVID, if COVID is God's fault, or because and like you said, because certain things don't have a face, we look for places to put blame and responsibility and to get, you know, answers from. However, to answer the question of, you know, including the church versus calling on the church, I think it's a dual thing. I think in one respect, especially, you know, in recent years, the church hasn't been included because the church hasn't taken initiative sometimes. And so if you consider our history, and you don't have to go back that far, if you just go back to, like, you know, the civil rights era, the church was at the forefront. You didn't have to call on the church. We were there. The meetings were hosted at the church. The leaders were church leaders and pastors. And so the church took initiative, so you didn't have to call on them, they were already there. And what I've noticed in recent years, at least, is that, you know, the church has had to be called on because in certain areas and at certain times, the church has kind of been a bit silent, or at least not as vocal and not as engaged and involved in these things. And so it's like, where you at, church? Where are you, right? The other side of that, though, is I do think that there are initiatives taken, maybe not, you know, from as many churches and as many church leaders, but there are initiatives taken. And strangely enough, you know, we are kind of living in a time where there's a certain group that I won't name specifically, but there's a certain group, evangelicals, as they've been called recently, that have kind of disassociated social issues from God, right? And so if church leaders and if pastors, particularly Black ones, speak out on racism, speak out on other social ills that we deal with, it's kind of viewed as going against what God is actually all about, when the truth of the matter is God cares about all of that, right? He doesn't just care about your spiritual well-being. He doesn't just care about you going to heaven. He also cares about the hell that you go through on earth. And it is our responsibility as the church and as church leaders to, as we say, speak truth to power and call out those things that plague our societies and speak to those things and provide answers and resources as much as we can to those things that hinder us and hold us back and harm us, excuse me. And so I think it's a dual thing. I think that the church has been, in certain cases, kind of silent or not as vocal. However, I do think on the flip side, when we are vocal and when we do take initiative, it's met with so much resistance and opposition because it's viewed as counter God instead of viewing it as something that God cares and is concerned about as well.
And I'm going to sum it up for the panelists because I don't know if you guys heard him clearly enough. But for me, what I got from that is, in the past, the church was the forefront and was oftentimes present and didn't need to be called upon because they were already there. Right. And that this sense of hope is what we as a culture rely on. So when there's crisis, when there is an issue, that's where we know to go. So that's where we go. Did I sum it up right?
Right.
Now, another thing that I've seen a lot in our culture is our men. What I'm seeing now, and I'm proud to say that I've seen by Black on the TV, on the radio, on a GIF on Instagram. So we are buying black and we are leveraging our wealth as a culture. But in that, it's also important to understand what and how that institution, whether it be the lack thereof, how that affects our mental health. So from our financial piece of the pie, we would like to know what your take is on how the financial institution or the lack thereof impacts minority mental health.
Oh my God. You know, I'm not a mental health professional, but you know, from what I see a lot is people stress more about money than anything else. When we talk about marriage, you know, the marriage fail, you know, kids we're having that discussion a couple months ago. I said, you know, marriages don't really fail on a lot of trust, infidelity, things that's big, but it's all about money, right? And you know, just like we say all the time, you know, your health is your wealth, vice versa, right? And that means mental health, because if your money ain't right, right? Because that's what my mom used to say. But if your money's not right, your mind's not right, right? And when your mind gets out of alignment, that means budget goes out of money because we're trying to compensate for something that's missing, and we don't know what it is. But what do? We have a compulsive spending to try to make ourselves feel better, and when we don't really get to the root cause of it, that it's really my mind that's destitute. And when you talk about trauma, I heard them talk about trauma, you know, and people don't realize trauma is passed on from generation to generation. It doesn't stop. Sometimes people think, well, that was back then. No, you still see the residue of that right now. And because of that, just like wealth, we talk about wealth, generational, right? And if that was trauma 50 years ago, 60 years ago, that impacted the wealth 50, 60 years ago, it's going to impact wealth for that now, right? So, you know, I tell people, you know, when I talk to my clients, I talk about the mind, like, what's your mind like? What do you feel about money? What do you think about money? Because if that's off, no matter what plan I set in front of you, it's not going to work anyway, it's not going to work anyway.
I have some people.
And I'm being so serious because, you know, because like somebody said earlier, we kind of brush it under the rug in our community about our mental health, right? And we attribute all of the issues, socioeconomic issues that we have to other things. And it's really about how we think, but a lot of that has been impacted, you know, and I don't play victim at all. And I don't try to do that. But it is some of the things, like we talk about racism, specific racism that we have endured that cuts us off from assets and build wealth, right? But you know, even I tell people, I say, even for those of us that are successful, what we call successful, right? You know, that got the house, the car, the 2.5 kids, all those things, even we still suffer mentally when we see our birth decisions. When I go to communities where I know my people are, and I see them living below what we were created for, I struggle with it. I go at home at night, I think about that, like what can we do, right? You know, I heard Brandon talk about the church being the forefront, but it's like, and that stress lies with people. So not just the person that's dealing with it, it affects us all. So that's why it's important, though, that our mental health is there, but we have to, you know, definitely improve our financial situation, right? Get the education, get the literacy. And, you know, I tell my team, my agents all the time, I said, you have to be careful to, you know, when you deal with our people because of stress and people, you know, making you feel like you're not good enough, you're not smart enough. And how you approach that with people, because a lot of those things are mental. And in order to help our people, we have to make sure that we have that grace. Right. And we're sensitive to that. And we understand that, but it definitely, it plays a big role. And the way you deal with money, it is like, it's probably more important than even like I say, that mental health and money, it just can't end. And when you see people suffering financially, it's probably something suffering mentally, it's probably problematic.
Okay. But what happens when you have two members to work together and you use, buying things as retail therapy?
You owe a nickel.
Yes.
That's like a point. So we're not retail therapy.
Panelists, would you like to say something?
That's not actual therapy. Please seek actual therapy. Let me tell you, there's always going to be a new thing that you're going to want to buy.
And next week, you don't feel bad about it. Now your mental starts messing. Oh my God, I should get that $500.
Or hang it up and forget about it.
Yeah, right. All right, so with both of our cornerstones in the community, our church and our financial institutions speaking to that, we are going to take a quick break, about 5 or 10 minutes, and we're going to reset and we're going to talk about reframing the narrative and moving into recovery. So first, before we do that, I want to get you guys poll questions. Do you have them up? The question that you answered, your paddles? The first question, anxiety. We have anxiety and depression.
What was the
You have depression.
That was anxiety.
Anxiety. A
Was depression, right?
A
No, it
was
wasn't depression, it was.
A is bipolar.
Yeah, A.
So it sounds like the census is between anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
And you have bipolar.
You bipolar, so yeah.
So oftentimes what we see diagnosed in our community is going to be anxiety. And that is definitely, we see right lagging behind it, depression, but oftentimes what we will see is anxiety. And that is because the things that we endure, that we talked about on this platform, whether it be what you see, what you experience, what you live, anxiety is the #1 diagnosis in our community, okay? So we'll take a quick little break and we'll come back and we will start talking about recovery and reframing chaos and crisis, right?
Welcome back. We are live and we're back with the panelists. I'm gonna get out the way. But my name is Kenshay Saxton. I am a talk partner, and we are here with the last and final poll question. I'm going to ask the question. Everybody in the audience, I have y'all paddles? Yes. Okay. The last question. The biggest barrier of mental health services is A, adequate access, B, resources, C, awareness. You got any paddles? No, I already know that. You may not. It looks like we may have a little competition right here. So we're gonna get the answer at the end, and then they gonna give us theirs. Okay, I'm gonna repeat the question. The biggest barrier of mental health services is A, adequate access, B, resources, C, awareness.
Oh, what do you mean by resources? Money?
It's not bad.
Money, therapy, not retail therapy, but therapy. Yeah, be specific. The funding for the healthcare therapy and everything like that.
Retail therapy don't count?
Say that again, buddy?
Retail therapy don't count?
No, retail therapy do not count.
No? Okay.
So they do not count. Buddy, you have your answer over there?
I had retail therapy, but you said it don't count, so.
Dang, well, that's wrong. Okay, so we are ready, and I'm going to turn it back over to our talk host. And there we go, Miss Tiffany.
All right, Mrs. I'm sorry. We are back for the last 45 minutes of this discussion. And as I mentioned, this is the good part. This is the icing on the cake. This is where we talk about strategies. This is where we talk about combating stigma. This is where we talk about approach. And we're going to start off by talking about facts. So fact, if you do not know, there is a misconception amongst our community that we, as minorities, lack sensitivity to pain. Meaning that we have to oftentimes justify the root of our pain and even our mental illness. So if you guys recall the tennis player, Naomi Osaka. So recently she refused or declined per se to speak with the press before a tournament. And of course, she was fined $15,000. She was receptive of paying the fine, willing to pay the fine, but she was criticized for not speaking with the press. It was not until she told her truth, her own bout with depression, that she was then labeled as courageous. Now, I recall in my own career having worked with a high-profile case or a high-profile victim of a mass murder in the South Side of Houston. And none of the doctors looked like me. And of course, this patient came in not just experiencing trauma, but experiencing a lot of emotional distress. And instead of taking note of the reason that he came into the hospital, having been a part of the shootout in his home, losing his sibling, his spouse, and an unborn child, the doctors attribute his emotional distress to drug use. It took weeks for myself, along with other direct care staff, to say, no, this is what's going on. This is why this patient is crying in the middle of the night. This is why this patient is combative. For them to say, hey, you may be going through something. And that is something that we see oftentimes in our community, oftentimes from generation to generation, passed down, because, hey, we're supposed to be able to be strong enough to get over this. We're supposed to be strong enough to not acknowledge vulnerability. When oftentimes, when it comes down to vulnerability, we have to be strong enough to be vulnerable, to understand our vulnerability plays into our health and our work. So to be able to reframe the cause of chaos, the crisis, to move toward a point of being able to discuss the recovery piece of the pie, I want to ask our panelists, as a byproduct of racism, having experienced pain, defeat, and rage, passed down from generation to generation, how do we combat the stigma of minority mental health within our community? And at what point do we take charge of the change? So we'll first go to our healthcare professional.
Absolutely. So I think we challenge the stigma around mental health by talking about it. We need to normalize seeking mental health assistance when you need it. Tell me this, would anyone in this room make fun of a person or judge someone who fell and broke their arm, and then ask for pain medicine, surgery, physical therapy to help mend that broken arm? No one would. You know, so your mental health is just as important as your physical health. If you are depressed or having a manic episode, or you're hearing voices, there is no way you can properly work, take care of a family, or even enjoy life. Unfortunately, negative attitudes and beliefs towards people who live with mental health conditions is particularly strong within the Black community. One study showed that 63% of Black people believe that a mental health condition is a sign of personal weakness. As a result, people may experience shame about having a mental illness and worry that they may be discriminated against. That's unacceptable. We need to treat mental health just like we do physical health and encourage people to seek help when they need it. To reduce the stigma, we need to have open conversations that revolve around educating others and supporting those on their mental health journey. You know, I know we make jokes all the time, like, well, you have a mood swing, you bipolar. You know, we can't do that. Maybe they are bipolar. You know, instead of like being hush-hush about it, we need to bring it out into the light. I also believe that the change is taking place right now. More so now than ever in our history, we are having open discussions about mental health. When you open Instagram, you find ads for therapists in your area. You can turn on the TV and see LeBron James promoting the Calm app that is focused on emotional intelligence, or Deion Sanders talking about his suicide attempts. Steps are being made to challenge the stigma around mental health, but we still have a long way to go. And I believe combating that stigma, the first thing is about just talking about it and not making people feel bad when they are going through something. You know, I know humor is often a way to kind of, you know, deal with stress. You know, but when someone's going through a mental health crisis, we need to respond accordingly, you know, and help them just as though they broke their arm.
What about you? Yeah, so when you talk about reframing, you know, it's about, yeah. I know from my perspective, I think it's all about education, financial education and financial literacy, right? And I think that's how we can, you know, start to fix it from the financial standpoint, right? And not just, you know, right now, there's so much about wealth building that's out there online until people don't really understand the components of that. That would be, and it's like you can turn on, like you said, you can open up your Instagram, your Facebook page, and there are all types of people talking about wealth, right? And I tell my clients, because I get like a ton of calls about everything that they read online. And I said, you know, there's a difference between financial education and financial literacy, right? And a lot of people don't know the difference. But I think that first I tell people, you need to get with a financial education, okay? You need to seek that out. You know, like she said something very important. Like, you know, we tend to think in our community, well, I'm strong and I can't be wrong. I can't not know something, right? And a lot of times we fight against that, so we'll read something on the internet and become like a guru, when you really should be seeking out, you know, that financial advisor or coach to help you put together a systematic game plan, right? Understand the foundation and start to build that financial house. And once I think people put those things in place, having a written plan down, it alleviates stress. And I tell people, I mean, just me, you know, before I even started doing what I was doing, I was always doing that because it takes that pressure off of me, you know. But if you got somebody that have that expertise and that knowledge to help guide you through that, I think that would, you know, curb some of that anxiety and depression, you know, and when it comes to your money and make better decisions with your money. So that's my thing. That's where
What about you, Shayla?
I think the generational aspect, you think about how we ended up here. We weren't thought of as humans as a breed, or we weren't even a whole man or a whole person. So when you see somebody as less than human, you don't give them human attributes. So they're not going to have pain. They're not gonna have emotions. They're not gonna have anger. And when you see all that come to the forefront, you think it's being irrational. And you think, oh, that's just an angry black woman, or oh, you just don't know how to deal with it. And so because, I think somebody talked about earlier, us kind of retreating to the whole strong mantra, like I'm just a strong woman, I can handle it. It's not about handling things, because generally when you don't get the help that you need and you don't seek assistance, then you retreat to certain vices like overspending or drugs or things like that. And then you have drugs that can lead to paranoia and can worsen all the mental health things that you have, or can make you feel more depressed. Then you lose all your money, and then you don't have the resources to eat or to take care of your basic, taxes of living. So then it just puts you in a worse position than when you started. And then I agree. It's just all about talking about it, having an open dialogue, letting people know, it's okay to have these diagnoses. I mean, nobody makes money, like you said, for breaking your arm or for having diabetes or anything. Do what you're supposed to do, change. Right. If they tell you that you need to be on medication, always get a second opinion from my standpoint. But it helps to talk to somebody who looks like you. So I would be hesitant to go into an office and have someone diagnose me with something and they don't believe that I have pain, or they can't see me for my primary issue. If you can't manage my high blood sugar, or you can't manage my blood pressure, you can't tell me that I need to be on antipsychotics. I want somebody who can holistically and then explain to me why. Don't let people give you a pill and say it's gonna fix everything, because it doesn't. There are all the medications that you can take for these psychiatric disorders have side effects. Some of the side effects are suicidal thoughts and homicidal thoughts. If you haven't gotten the support that you need and the community that you need to be able to talk about these things, you can end up on those medications thinking you're doing the right thing and still not have the support that you need, and then you still, are without community. So if you have people around you who will, have that dialogue with you, you can be open about it, not judge you, and don't let anybody tell you that you're doing the wrong thing for your mental health. If you feel like you need to be on medication, take the medication. If you feel like, I need to leave my kids with their godmother or their auntie because I need a break, take a break. Don't end up on Channel 5 News because you thought you were too strong and then you stay, because it doesn't take away the conviction. You're going to sit in jail. So, you have to make sure that you protect yourself and protect those around you from, the potential of harm that you can end up doing to yourself or others from leaving all these things unchecked.
I like that. I think what really stood out to me about your insight was community. And for me, I think oftentimes we have a community, but our community is not abreast or lack the education or lack the insight that I have to hold it in, where when I hold it in, then I snap, and then the community is just like, well, why you didn't say nothing,
Right.
So I'm interested from a community standpoint, Rodney. Why do you feel, or what do you feel will be the change in minority mental health as it relates to the community?
The start, as someone said, would definitely be awareness. Awareness is number one. Secondly, I think what falls after awareness would be leadership. Now, when people talk about turning on, opening Instagram or seeing what's wrong, these are leaders or potential leaders. Now, one thing about leadership is not always the cool person. As it pertains to the vaccine, I'm sure you've seen a cool person telling you, hey, go get vaccinated. I just seen a juvenile video where he's like, hey, go get vaccinated, right? He's a cool person, he's not a leader. So a leader is somebody who, I would say, maybe like a trader, who's a person of the people, they're trusted around the people or community, and they're able to give you the information you need. A cool person could potentially make something cool. And LeBron could say, hey, therapy is cool, and we all go to therapy, but the leader will tell you the benefits, to going to therapy. All right. Also, as it pertains to community, resources come back. It continues to show its face in regards to every effort towards minority communities. Mental health is not at the forefront. I know where I can go get food when they're giving food away or clothes away or whatever away, but nobody said, hey, I'm here to move on. I'm here you just need to come in and just we can share together. You know, for someone like me, I've been attached to some of these efforts, and also as a community leader, I've also gained perspective on the importance. Before, I had a friend who suffered with depression, but for someone who doesn't have information on depression, you don't know how to handle depression, or someone who's depressed, and so you end up handling or mishandling. Right? So the key is to get leaders on board, get leaders aware, people that are already considered leaders. That when I say leaders, I mean people who are followed. Right? So once you get leaders aware, then we can get to talk. Naomi Osaka, she's a popular person. She's not a leader. You know, there's a lot of popular people saying mental health this, mental health that, but to the average person, all we see is mental health. Not knowing that, hey, we're similar. She's going through what I went through, or he's going through what I went through. And so that's the only way to finally come up with a plan, because that's ultimately the goal. The ultimate goal is to figure out an actual process. Because Black people as a community, we talk about it a lot. Oh, you're gonna get diabetes. Don't eat so much sugar. Or don't put so much salt in your food. Or, you know, don't do this. Don't go out in the sun so much.
Right.
You know, we come up with all these things that were passed to us, but nobody said, hey, your mental health is important. Do this. You know, and so we have to first become aware, make leaders aware, and then come up with a real plan, and we can pass that.
I love that. I love that. That is awesome. And I definitely agree with getting our leaders involved and putting them on the forefront. Kind of like what we discussed about having the church on the forefront. So Brandon, what is your insight in regards to how we can come back and change the narrative of minority mental health in our community?
Well, from my vantage point, from a faith perspective, I think it starts by understanding that real faith does not ignore the reality of real issues that we face. We ought to be able, we should be able to diagnose without demonizing. I think in a lot of instances within, you know, at least the Black religious experience, at least, and y'all know how it is, you know, you got kids that act out, or people, you know, your families that, you know, cut up, or, you know, do different things. And Big Mama was quick to say that somebody's child was demon possessed and all, you know, especially if you came from a super religious family, you know, they demon possessed and they go get the oil and slang it on them. And the reality now, some of y'all kids really got demons, but anyway, but it's not necessarily that, you know, people are demon possessed. People are dealing with actual problems that require, you know, professional attention and assistance. And so we should be able to acknowledge that without demonizing it. And then lastly, I'll say, real faith does not neglect or reject the professional help that is available to us.
Right.
You know, God's holy power is still at work even through health professionals. It doesn't, you know, take away from your faith or your religious experience, whatever that might be. Should you get the professional help that you need and that you deserve in order to be whole. And so I think that if we understand that faith does not negate or doesn't have to, you know, reject, you know, professional assistance, and faith does not, you know, demonize real illnesses and real things that we deal with, perhaps that would, you know, motivate more people to get the help that they need and deserve.
I like that. I like the idea of being able to diagnose without demonizing, and being able to understand seeking professional help has nothing to do with your faith, or has little to do with your faith. It doesn't take away your faith or your trust in God. It just says, hey, I need something additional to be able to get past this, and be able to recover through this, and be able to walk through this. I think what I've seen from me, from my standpoint, within our culture, we live a lot by fear. You talked about it a little bit in regards to, hey, I don't want to say nothing about my child cutting up because Big Mama gonna say my child is, you know, filled with the devil or filled with the demons. And that's something that, you know, we fear, rightfully so. But being at a point where we can move past living by fear and living by facts, excuse me, and not by fear, I feel that these barriers put in place where we're not mindful of things like accidents. We're not mindful of things like exposure because we feel like we have to put on to be able to be okay and so that our family and our community is okay. So I'm interested to know from the spiritual lens and also from the financial lens, what investment you guys feel that we can make, tangible investment, in order to elevate our minority mental health? And where do we prioritize these investments? You want to take it first?
Probably investment, you know, as a people, once again, I go back to all about that education. I think that we have to normalize in our community, you know, we say it all the time, about making sure we have access to financial plans that are out there for us, right? And we have to, you know, not brush those things off and put them on the back burner like we don't understand how by not put those things in the proper place, how it really impact us. So I think when we talk about prioritizing, you know, it's got to be a problem, you know, it's constantly, it has to constantly impact everything. We don't have funds like, you know, somebody's talking about, you know, we don't have access. You know, so poverty puts us in a bad position. So from my standpoint, I really think that we have to really focus on, you know, what the plan is together, you know, starting from the basics. You know,
Amen.
I mean, you know, just something as little as that, because daddy died and we're not brothers did,
Right.
right?
We're not on social media with the
So it's, and I always ask people,
Right.
you know, people pass away in the family struggle, that's mental trauma.
Yeah.
That's trauma. It is. And it's like, you gotta make that stuff normal.
Yeah.
Have enough life insurance to where, you know, the family not get put out of the home.
And not even the life
Sure,
insurance, the burial, the pots, the everything.
Everything,
Cause
right?
grandma left money, cash policy. She ain't leave no, oh, I gotta take this insurance policy and go pay for my parents to die. No, those pots was already there and paid for prior to. So all that insurance money that you are saying they go get, they can actually live, better themselves, productive, anything. I say that all the time. Everybody wants the insurance, but they not going over there talking to Susie about the plot and locking in those prices because the funeral goes up every year, baby. Every year. And them insurance policies don't cover half of it if you die 20 years from now.
Yeah, it's true.
So lock it in.
That's true. Right. There you go. But yeah, so it's those things. I think that, you know, our community have to be aware of that, and they have to get the professionals to understand. You know, so the investment's got to be focused on, like for me, it's focused on just the awareness,
Right.
you know, and the education for the community, so that we can alleviate a lot of that mind that hear voices, you know, things like that, having heart attacks, stroke, because they're so stressed out, or under so much pressure. So that's my thing, you know, like I say, before I go back, you know, you gotta have a plan, it's gotta be a systematic plan. It cannot be erratic and emotional.
Right.
You know, I tell people sometimes, you know, we make emotional decisions that cause all kinds of problems for ourselves because we don't have the education in there to out here talking about things, and we go off of it without facts. Right?
I'd like to ask the pastor, how can we include the church? Because I know our church has mental health Mondays. And so, he's trying to normalize mental health issues.
Right.
And just like we have Wednesday Bible study that, everybody, in America almost has,
Right.
Wednesday Bible study for Baptists and, Sunday school. We need to, I think, maybe it would help the community if the church would more normalize getting help for mental health, as opposed to a food drive or a vaccine drive that is once a day.
Right.
You can get this done, one and done, you're out. With mental health, you have to have someone talking again and again and
Right.
again. It's a start of a conversation, but it's not a one-time thing.
Agree.
So I think, maybe the church can help with that, especially with their resources.
Right.
That people don't have enough money or life insurance or, not life insurance, but health insurance to pay for that kind of thing. Because life insurance doesn't pay for it, health insurance does.
Right.
And even if you get the, Affordable Health Care Act insurance, mental health, the provision for that is minuscule, meaning small. You can't get it, there's nothing there.
Brandon, did you hear that question from the audience? Speaking
Yeah,
from the
I think
spirit,
I think I heard majority of it.
speaking from a spiritual standpoint, from the church standpoint, what can the church do, and how can the church help with maybe coming up with a minority mental health, or with the healthcare Mondays, to be able to continue the conversation, not just in this platform, but ongoing, like you would see the traditional Bible study?
I think we should have more practical conversations. I do like what she said about the mental health Mondays. And from, if I heard her correctly, it sounds like that's an ongoing thing, like every week, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think, I think things like that do help towards that end, more practical conversations on a consistent basis. It's not just, because to be honest, it's not that the church, it's not that we don't have those conversations. They're just reserved for like events, you know what I mean? So we might have a conference or some type of special event, and just to say we did it, we might throw in a class or a course or whatever about mental, health, and you bring in a professional to talk about it just for that event, and then the conversation stops after that event is over. And so I think more consistent and practical conversations would help. I also think that partnerships between the faith community and those who work in mental health would benefit. I mean, would help greatly and benefit our communities greatly. I know at the church I just came from before I started pastoring my own church, we actually have a licensed therapist on staff.
That's awesome.
That our members are able to access, that assistance for free. We pay for it if you're a member of the church. And then of course, if you're not a member but you need help, we still assist. But and now that I'm pastoring the church of my own, I'm even thinking through how I can do something like that for my church and for my community, partnering with mental health professionals. And then, I think that the church, if we can I think we should create the space where people can get the information and receive the resources that they need. And so, for instance, going back to the example that she used about the mental health Mondays, maybe if there is a consistent thing that we have where people can come out to our churches and get information, get insight, get help, get connected with people who can help, I think that would benefit greatly as well.
So it sounds like your plan is going to be the forefront of what he's planning to do. Being able to collaborate with healthcare professionals and being able to offer a service, whether it be on staff or for consultation, to be able to have people and normalize this conversation on a consistent basis. All right. So those are all awesome insights. And one thing for me that I would like to kind of piggyback on is where I see that there is the fear and not the fact is we don't see enough professionals that look out there. Oftentimes, for me, I can't, and this may seem bad, I can't truly trust a person's perspective if I don't see or even on the forefront feel that they've experienced or have the same experiences as I do. And that may attribute to a lot of mistrust in our community because I don't see a physician that looks like me, because I don't see a nurse that looks like me, because I don't see a community leader that looks like me, or I don't see a financial advisor or a financial coach that looks like me. It's hard for me to trust what you're asking me to do because you don't know how far my money goes. Or you don't know, what I cooked for dinner last night because I only had chicken in the freezer. So those are things that I feel why we live in so much fear, because we don't see those that look like us, and also because we don't have the access to those things. During our last symposium, we talked a great deal about hope. And for this symposium, it was very important to me that we move past the coping standpoint and reframing the narrative and understanding truly what recovery is going to look like. So I sent, of course, our questions to our panelists before the actual event so that they can have their own strategies on hand on what we can do as a community, what approaches and tactics that they too plan to incorporate into their power and their platform in order to reframe recovery and get to a point where we move past the crisis, where we move past the chaos. For me, we are a culture of being reactive. And that's just the reality of it. The being reactive, like Rodney said, we talk about a lot of stuff, but we never put things into action. We never get to a point where we can be proactive. And the very big difference between being reactive and proactive is when it comes down to being proactive, you have strategies in place. You have a specific plan where you know, hey, when I walk away from this, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. This is how I'm going to better my own mental health. This is how I'm going to elevate what I'm going through so that I can get past what's going on in my life. So for our second to final question, I want to ask of each of you guys, what strategies did you come up with on how you're going to use your platform, your power to reframe the narrative? And anybody can go first.
I'll go first. So earlier when I introduced myself, I said that, I'm a second-year fellow with the American Psychiatric Association. And that is something that's very important to me because they're giving me money, like putting real money behind me to help minority communities in Houston with mental health. And so the question you asked today is something I thought about, before, you sent it to us. And so with that funding, part of my plan to bring this large scale event is to really target our youth. We all need change, but I think first starting with the youth is big too. And so my project, I was talking about with Rodney earlier, have a large scale basketball tournament. Bring our kids out, it's free, we're gonna have prizes, we're gonna have coaches, athletes come and talk about mental health, normalizing it. But I'm using that money to pay for therapy sessions, to pay for medications if you need it, to pay to see a psychiatrist. Maybe you need intensive outpatient therapy. And I know we talked about resources, and so that's part of my plan, putting money back into our community, educating them, as well as if you need help, I will get that for you. If you don't need help today, I want to teach you where to find it later on in life. Do you know how to spot depression? It's not just feeling sad, you can be irritable, upset, isolating, I just want to be by myself. That could be part of mental health. Right. And so that's part of my plan. The other side of that is, that's the reason I launched Core Psychiatry, because I wanted to take mental health from being this hush-hush topic, we don't talk about that, there's something in the forefront. And my mom earlier said I could say this, after my grandmother passed away, her mom, she went into a deep depression, and didn't want to really talk, my grandmother was her best friend. And so it took me a long time to convince her to go to therapy, and even though she knows about therapy, she's educated, blah, 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 it's still in our community that we just don't talk about it. When she finally went, she's appreciative of services, but that's what we need to do with the stigma and approaching it, and how do we use our platform we have to help those we can reach and then try to reach even further for other people in our community. So really that's how I want to reframe the narrative. And, you know, my impact may be small at first, but I'm trying to help a few people. And, you know, those, I want to try to make lasting impressions on them. And even when I put Porsche Psychiatry on Instagram, you know, maybe my post got a few likes, but I had a flood of messages into my DMs about, you know, dang, like I have been going through some stuff, you know, where can I find a Black psychiatrist, a Black therapist? You know, there are websites out there for your help. And like you said, only 2% of psychiatrists and therapists are Black. You know what I'm saying? And like, it makes a difference when you do see a provider that looks like you, that knows your cultural background, you know, that understands the slang and what you mean by it. You know, so if you want to go to psychologytoday.com, you can search for someone of your cultural background. You know, you can put in there, I want a Black therapist. You can search by gender. I only want a female. You know, you can search by your area. You can search by insurance. Are they taking insurance? Are they not? You know, there's also therapy for Black girls. You know, and there's also other programs that help Black men. If you can't pay for it, here's something to pay for it. Like you said earlier, you have to know about these things. Right. So we have to talk about it and kind of bring it that way.
And I'll piggyback off of her. We talk about how it's important for our therapists and people to look like that. But I also think, like she said, it's only 2%. And it's a lot of it, which means either we're going to go to this 2% or we're just not going to go, or we're going to have to trust someone else to help us. In that regard, it's going to take trusting someone else. Now, if I go to this person over here that doesn't look like us and I have a breakthrough, I can tell you that he can help. He can help you, help me, right? But it also takes going. We had a conversation, I don't need to get into the details, but there's a book that I shared with you. And I told you about how it's important to have the tools we use. Right. First, I have this information I have for you, but you have to know how to use it, you know? And when you realize how to use it, you realize that it actually works, right? So for me, in my sector, there was this project we did on the north side where we went door to door just to talk, just to get a gauge on the community, what they were feeling, what they were experiencing, what they were going through. I also learned at this time that there were schools in this area that basically labeled the kids. I don't necessarily want to say label, but when they enroll with these things attached to them. One parent household, they need help financially, they need help with food, you know, and so when it came time to give away food, I didn't necessarily have to do any research. I just went to these schools and they gave me these printouts of all these kids with all these issues. So for someone like me, it becomes this mountain. And for Black people, you'll notice if you don't take care of something right away, something else comes. And while you're tackling number two more come. Then you got 4 things. And then you got 8 things. You know, so it's important to have the tools necessary to tackle whatever. You mentioned proactive. Proactive means I can tackle one with them. And when 2 come, I'm done with 1 so I can tackle 2. Right? So for me, in my position, it's necessary to team up with people like her who have these, you know, these initiatives. It's important to basically map out things like that. With the church, with the Mental Health Mondays, it's important to keep it consistent. Right. So the stigma, it takes time for things to break. We were calling Black women strong for so long, and now we're realizing, hey, don't be so strong. That's not all that healthy. It's not all that healthy, right? And now mental health is normalized, but now we got to break out of it being normalized, and we got to talk about our session today, or talk about our breakthrough. We just sit here talking about, yeah, I'm depressed. All right, what did you do? Because I haven't heard anything from Naomi Osaka, and maybe I should. But if you're going to tell me you're depressed, I too have been depressed before. What do you do? You know, so that's important. So for me, coming up with different, you know, things to help. She mentioned a basketball tournament and getting kids signed up for mental health sessions. Super good. We need a lot more of that. 2% is not gonna help. 2% of the doctors is not gonna help us. It's gonna take us helping us trusting people outside of us until we can catch up, and then we get there that way. But we can no longer go on a trek. You know, we can't rush over it, sweep it under the carpet. We can't continue to do
Definitely. Collaboration, all about collaboration. Shayla, you want to speak to this question?
I completely agree. It is important, like you said, to find help where you can find it. And like you said, 2% is not enough. There are a crazy amount of Black people in need of these mental health resources because we have mental health issues that kind of are dropped on our doorstep. Like we're still seeing dead bodies of people getting gunned down by police and stuff on social media. Like you can't escape some of these secondary traumas that we talked about earlier. So it's important that everyone be an advocate and try to have an open dialogue about these things. Don't shut people down. I know I personally, like I don't have a huge platform, but I am an open book. I've had depression, I've had anxiety, I've dealt with it in the past after I became a nurse. Education does not negate the fact that you can have any of these issues. It's just, thankfully, I'm educated enough to be able to find those resources myself. I know where to go. I know who to ask. I know who to trust. When I wasn't able to find a Black therapist, because a lot of this stuff is new, where you could go on and find somebody who's Black, because we're just now getting into the buy Black, purchase, you know, let the dollar circulate more in our community. Before we didn't have those resources. So it was more like word of mouth. You know, I told somebody I was feeling this type of way and they said, hey, me too. I have this therapist. She's full, but she did recommend this other person. And that's how we can find, you know, that community of people who may not look like us, but they see enough people that look like us that they can empathize and they know how to work with what we bring to the table. Because you have to realize as a healthcare provider, you're usually meeting somebody on their worst day. You're not meeting them at 100%, and you can't expect them to function that way. You're gonna meet some people and they're gonna go through these courses and they're gonna find the psychiatrist, they're gonna have rage, they're gonna have anger, because that may be how their depression or their anxiety manifests. But you have to be able to know how to deal with that instead of just writing them off as, oh, they're too, you know, they're too far gone. They need to be hospitalized. They can't be helped. So just making sure that we have those resources. And then I know last time we had this discussion, you know, we posted the flyer, we sent it out to people, and I had people contact me like, hey, you know, I am having a bad day. I saw you did that symposium. Can you just talk to me real quick? And, you know, have built relationships from people just by being an open book. So I encourage everybody to be a listening ear and really be non-judgmental, because everybody is one instant away from being somewhere rocking in a corner needing that help, whether it be from a financial standpoint or, you know, losing someone that's close to you. Because like I lost my uncle and my grandfather died 2 weeks apart this year. And one of the best things was seeing that they had their finances in order, because we were able to go home and grieve and go through things in the house. And we were all able to agree as a family and say, you know, granddaddy wouldn't want that, or, you know, let's make this decision cohesively as a family. We all can sit around the table. There was no bickering. There was no fighting over money. Yes, there were things that were left to people, but his will was his will. Get a will. Everybody talks about having all this money and chasing the almighty dollar, which is cool because you need money to live. But when you die, don't let that turn into a fight. Get an advance directive.
Right.
Get a power of attorney.
Yes.
People think that they're only for people on their deathbed who have cancer, who you know, that are terminally ill, who can't make these decisions.
Right.
You could be in a car accident that will render you powerless and will render your mind unable to make decisions. You need to have somebody who you trust to be able to make those decisions for your financial well-being, for your household, especially if you have young children. You know, thinking of who do you want your kids to be left with should you die. I mean, I'm pretty young. I think I might be a little bit older now. But I'm pretty young, but I have children. So I have life insurance. My kids have policies the day that they were born. My kids have life insurance policies. The earlier you get it, the cheaper it is. Right. I'm literally paying $6 a month for hundreds of thousands of dollars in life insurance on my children, hoping that I never have to use it. But when they get older, it'll go with them. And then if you get it when they're younger, you negate the fact that they have these pre-existing conditions. There are a lot of older people now who, because they have heart disease or because they have cancer, now you're trying to get life insurance and you can't, right? Because the company is saying you're a liability, you don't want to pay for it. We know you're going to die right now. You know, we're not even going to get those years of money that you don't get for paying into this policy, so we're not going to cover you. There are people with defibrillators who don't have that kind of insurance. You know, when you have a spouse who have those pre-existing conditions, make sure you go up on your life insurance policy. There are life insurance policies that have payouts while you're alive, where you can pull money from it and pay it back if you do hit that financial hardship. Not that it's something that you really need to do a lot, but it's there in case you need it. You have to start creating these safety nets and be more proactive instead of being reactive and having selfish plates and asking for donations, which is cool because you should help support people when they don't have it. But don't put yourself in a position where you can't manage, because it's not just, you know, you have to look out for more than just you. We have had the mindset, because we haven't had generational wealth passed on to us, that we don't want to leave it for our kids. We think, I've worked so hard for this, I'm gonna spend all my money before I go. And that's not how you know, think about how much easier your life would have been if you didn't have to worry about where you can go to college, if you can afford it. If you're not smart enough, you know, you feel you're not smart enough to get a scholarship. You feel like your whole scholarship, your education is riding on your athletic ability. Like, you shouldn't have to sacrifice your body to have an education or to have these resources that put you ahead in life. Make sure that you're leaving things behind for the people that you love and allocate them as such, so that when you do go, it's an acceptance of, you know, okay, my mom already told me I'm getting the house. My mom already told me my brother was getting the financial assets. We agreed on that before she even went. We had this conversation. There's no need to go to blows about it because we have an understanding before we even have that conversation. But I think too, now we steer away a lot from death. We don't want to talk about it because it's an uncomfortable conversation. And so you don't talk about, you know, the afterlife proceedings until it's too late and we're in the middle of planning a funeral. And sometimes we don't even know how to do that. Yeah. So, you know, making sure that you have all these bases covered. And if you don't, at least know one person who you can call and say, hey, you know, I'm sorry for your loss. I know your mom passed. My dad just passed. How did you do it? Where did you go? What is the cost of cremation versus the plot? You know, how much is this going to run me? And where can I go for assistance if I don't have it? And, you know, just making sure that when you do get those resources, write them down. Create a list. So when somebody comes to you, it's a quick, let me just shoot you this note that I have in my phone and text you this lady's address. I'm gonna let her know you're calling. You know, give her a call and she's gonna help you out. If you don't call, I told her to call you. So she'll be reaching out to you in about 10 minutes. So, you know, just being accountable for the people in your circle instead of just, you know, saying your friends, saying your acquaintances and not really investing in the people that you have around you.
Yeah, so, you know, from my platform, of course, like we talked about everything that I talk about, right? But so what we're doing, like I said, I always talk about a system. Everything about process. Right. So for me, when I've been ready to launch, currently we're talking about this because we like say education is important. Is that awareness, and I figured out during COVID, so in real life, Black people mad about people are going to be launching our Money Matters series in August, right? And it's and I tell people, I say, because I want people to be educated in a protected environment. Okay, meaning that they get an opportunity to learn and not be on the spot, because sometimes when people are one-on-one and you start talking about all these different things, you can get like tight and like, oh, let me see, and then you start kind of what you say, watching about like, oh no, I got this done, I got that done, right? Because, but so what we're gonna be doing is like we talk about Money Matters series, like 4-week series. We talk about everything that she just finished talking about, right? But just building that foundation. We call it the financial house, building up all the way through the life insurance, through the investment, you know, the retirement plan, estate plan, you know, just college funds, all of that stuff that deals with financial house, education, and then give them the tools to apply that, right? In the right way, and what's right for their family, because every family is different. Okay? So, that's the way, you know, going forward that I'm going to be using my platform, which goes back, if you got those things that peace of mind, like you said, you know, nobody's fighting for money, but you have bills, and nobody's trying to figure out how we're going to put somebody in the ground, or how we're going to pay the next month's rent because that person is gone. You know, those are the things that, you know, we need to tackle, you know, to make sure people understand what education is, have the knowledge.
Brandon, what about you? How do you plan to use your platform in order to come back and reframe the narrative for recovery?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I'm a new pastor, and I'm not only new to the church where I'm serving now, but I'm also new to the community that my church is in. I'm familiar somewhat with the community, but I'm new to it as far as being in it. And so I've been spending since I've been there, which has been like 2 months now. I've kind of just been assessing the community, assessing what I see, taking in information I've gained from members and others who have been in the community for a considerable amount of time, just to kind of see what needs are, if there's lack, to see where there is, a void that needs to be filled. And because one of my heart's desires for our church is to not just be a church where people come, for worship and a spiritual experience, but one of my desires, and I've communicated this to them, that I want our church to be a resource hub for the community, whatever that might look like. We're already serving food, and I mean, not to say that we can't do more, but we're already doing that. However, I'm vacillating and thinking through other ways and avenues by which we can be a resource hub for our community, whether that's, whether it means, because we're blessed to have a pretty nice facility. So whether that means, maybe opening up some sort of center where kids can have access to internet, to do schoolwork, whether that's, as I believe someone mentioned, about, the church providing resources as far as people getting, professional help,
Right.
but budgeting that to where we can actually offer that kind of assistance. And so yeah, that's my heart's desire, for us to be a resource of our community and to fill those voids that need to be filled, so that our people can be healed and whole from every perspective.
That's good. All of you guys kind of highlighted what I feel will reframe the ideal of recovery. And that is accountability, that is access, that is meeting people where they are, because as you mentioned, everything is gonna look different for everybody. But being able to meet people where they are and being accessible to people. You would be surprised outside of this particular platform with Tiff Talks, how many DMs, calls, and texts that I get on a daily basis. Like, I still don't know how my business card has circulated to the north side of Houston or to Louisiana or to Mississippi, but it has. And I get those calls, not just about my education, but how can I help this person? Or what resources do you have in your community that I can create in my own community? And I think what we as a people need to address and accept is being accountable for each other. I mean, there's no way that I can call someone my friend if I'm not accountable for you. If I see you struggling, I don't need you to tell me that you're struggling. I see you struggling. And I'm friend enough to come and say, hey girl, I see, I see some changes in your behaviors. What's going on? Do you need someone to talk to? Is it someone that I can help you with? And if I can't, be able to direct you and where you need to be. So for me, all of you guys really kind of summed up my own perspective of this. And to kind of wrap up today, being that we've talked about everything from the link between systemic racism and trauma and the whole premise of racism to how that impacts our mental health, to vicarious trauma and secondary trauma, and now these approaches, the takeaway for our audience here today and those that are online, I want you guys to be able to share your single testimony. So one thing that you want everyone that have bared witness to this presentation today to take from you. Right? Would you like to start? Okay, but would you like to start?
I'm sorry. I really want to thank you for having this event today, for getting us here, for talking about it, bringing awareness to it. I really think that's kind of breaking down some of the hurdles we're already dealing with. We discussed a lot of topics, like you said, but the final message that I would like to leave you with is this: reach out for help before you're drowning. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you feel at all different from whatever usual self that is, tell someone. I don't care who it is. Tell someone, tell your doctor, reach out, Google it, figure out who I can talk to about that. Your mental health affects everything around you. It affects your thoughts, how you perceive things, your relationships, your career, your physical health. You know what I'm saying? Why be sad? Why be irritable? Why be fatigued when you don't have to? It's okay not to be okay. You don't have to be the strong Black woman. You know what I'm saying? We all experience heartache and stress, you know, and racism plays into that too. So my final message, if you need it, don't be quiet about it. Scream for help before you drown.
You ready, right?
My biggest takeaway would be to start the conversation. Me and my friends, my male friends, we've started what we call therapy session Sunday, where Black men talk about issues that are not normal in the world. All right, so my hope is that once you start the conversation, the question for solution will come. All right, so that's my takeaway. My takeaway and what I want to leave with is start the conversation, and mainly with someone that you trust.
My main takeaway is to for both, what everybody has said so far. To making sure that you are in tune with yourself. Self-preservation is a tool. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you can pour into yourself before you don't have anything left for anyone else. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't let yourself be overextended or be overcome so that you are drowning. And then if somebody does come to you with a cry for help, if you don't know where to go, come to me business card, because she has all these resources and she knows a crazy amount of people. And if you can't Google it, if you don't know where else to turn back to whatever led you here today and talk to somebody here. So I'm pretty sure all of us would be willing to, if not help you ourselves, pass it on to someone who we feel like is better.
Yeah, so I take away, I mean, like I said, nothing expert, not in like Friday, things that you see, but I think somebody said it's okay, right? Not to be okay. It's okay not to be okay. Right? Because sometimes we are very private, which I love about us. We do care about pride. Sometimes it can be the right message, right? And it's at some point, let's guard that and say, you know what, I'm struggling. I'm struggling in this. It's causing me to mess up, and I need to get some help. And I think that is probably the biggest thing, let somebody know that you need help. And seek out the people that can help you, that, like you said, trust. And so doing this thing alone. Because sometimes I tell people, I say, where the devil gets us is when we're isolated. That's why God has created all of us, the different unique talents and skills, so that we can pour it to help somebody else. So you don't have to be isolated in this journey called life. You have plenty of brothers and sisters out here that's willing to help you, teach you, educate you. They don't know, they know people that you know, right? And just, don't let that pride thing get in the way and stop you from getting.
All right, Brandon, it's to you now. What is your takeaway from today's presentation?
There we go. First of all, thank you for having me on, and shout out to all of the other amazing panelists. I've learned a lot from you guys today. But one thing that I want to make sure we understand, that I would like to communicate to us all, is that God not only cares about us getting to heaven, He also cares about us overcoming the hell that we face on earth. And you do not have to, nor should you ever suppress the real, very, very real issues that you face for the purpose of perpetuating a facade of faith. You know what I mean? Get the help you need, get the assistance that you need. And like the sister said, if you can't, if you don't know where to start, or, whatever, You know, it's for those watching and for those in the room, you know, it's right here at your fingertips, right here in your face. God will always provide a way of escape. That's what the Bible teaches us. He always provides a way of escape. And so whenever you need help, God will always put it in your path. You just have to actively seek for it. So, yeah.
Good, that's good. You guys have shared not only your time with me, but your wealth of knowledge and insight with me, and that is an investment in me. And I think for me, my takeaway and what I kind of live by this year is the ideal of making room. So making room for my mental health, making room for things that matter to me, making room to prioritize my mental health, and understanding that truly my health is my wealth. If I'm not okay, trust me, my house is not okay. And because I've learned that, my takeaway and what I encourage people to do is to make room for things that are a matter of importance to you, and understanding that your health is your wealth. It ties into everything. And if you prioritize that, then you will find a way to be okay. Whether that be reaching out to healthcare professionals, or reaching out to people in the field, reaching out to someone that you trust, or being able to just find resources. So that is my takeaway. I'm going to turn it over to our top partner so that she can share with you the answer to the final question. We will wrap up by allowing our panelists to share their handles so that they can follow you on social media, and that will conclude our presentation.
So I'll ask the question again. Okay. The biggest barrier of mental health services is adequate access, resources, and then awareness. Let me see your answers.
Resources.
Awareness.
Resources.
Y'all always say black people crazy, but they don't know.
Well, no. So the answer is adequate access. It's not readily available, or no one knows where to get it from. So our task is to make those resources available. And that's it.
All right, so to you guys, our panelists, thank you so very much for spending this Sunday afternoon with me and with our audience. Please share your handles so everyone will be able to follow you guys and know how to access you. Right, is it okay if we start with you?
I gotta find out what's my No, like you can follow. But they can follow me on Domino Effect Houston, which is Instagram, DOMINO, effect with an EHOU. That's it.
All right. You can find me at Porch Psychiatry on Instagram. Porch, my last name, PORCHE, and then psychiatry.
All right, Shayla.
And on Instagram, my name is Curls and Scrubs.
And my Instagram is just Nick20, JUSNICK.
Right. And what about you, Brandon? Can you share your handle for us, please?
My Instagram is B as in Brandon _ THEOPHILUS, Theophilus, B_Theophilus.
All right. And of course, you guys know where to find me at JKC Marketing on Instagram, and on Facebook, I am JAYJ Kenco Marketing. I appreciate you guys for sharing with me your Sunday afternoons, and for sharing with me your time via virtual audience as well. This, unfortunately, is the last Tiff Talks of this season. We are concluding our blooming season with this Minority Mental Health Symposium, but we will be back in August for our back to school kickoff. And of course, some more kind of hot topics that you guys are already talking about, starting with funny accountability. So look out for our season 3 for Tiff Talks coming August 2021. You guys, thank you.